Okay, so here we are in the beginning of winter. This is really 39 going into 40 right here because we're looking November, December. Still 39 officially, but... Alright, so the Germans played German mobilization card. They hadn't played one yet, and this gets them right to the point. This is really at the brink of the war at this point. And they got a significant number of new pieces which they've placed along that French border. It looks like they're definitely going into the French war off the bat. Over on the Japanese side, they did their second army expansion card. And here, they managed to not quite crack Chongqing, but it's pretty close to falling. Once that goes, well, then they can start playing for their truce and get out of the war. The problem here is Hopei and Sichuan, they'd like to keep them, and they're not going to be able to do that unless they can set up puppet governments in them. At least that's the way I'm reading the concession card. They'll get one in Jiangsu, which is cool because Jiangsu has one of these victory point areas. But the other two they'd like to keep because it doesn't do them a lot of good to just have gained one over all of this time. They want all three of them. Alright. Beyond that, big pile of troops showing up for the Germans there. Alright, beyond that we got to go to other people's card plays. The Western Allies, the choice of relocating Chinese industries. Moved over and brought Yunnan into the war. I'm going to discard this counter, but so they're now part of nationalist China. Whether or not that's going to be sufficient to hold off the Japanese, hard to tell. Conceivably, the Japanese could just write Yunnan off and say, we'll take the surrender and leave that alone if they can get their other results. But if they end up advancing into Yunnan, well, maybe they want that too then. Unlikely their cards will produce that many puppet states, though, and my reading seems to indicate that's what they need. And over in the U.S., well, on the Western European side, they supported the Republicans. Remember, they've taken control of the Spanish War, and they managed to get a victory there and move back into Valencia. And that's still pretty much up in the air. Okay, so over to the Soviets. And our Russian friends do very little. Again, in the East, just nothing at all. Moved to Litvinov diplomacy over here in Europe. Get a bonus step off of it. They didn't get an event. They were hoping maybe to rectify Poland or something, or gain an ally, or anything really. Well, it didn't happen. So that means we're going to be moving on into the 1940 proper. And I, of course, label this as 1940 because, I don't know, I've gotten in that habit. But I've got some stuff in the display boxes to roll and see where it ends up. And then, the war's gotta open up pretty soon. Even if you say, they can back down the forces, whatever. Well, no, this is a game about World War II, and it's not going to stop. The number of cards that Germany has is kind of forcing them to push things forward. We'll see. Alright. End of the day here, heading out of January, February into the early spring in 1940. Not a lot happened over in Europe. The French ended up losing a step to the Spanish Civil War. And then over here in China, we see the Japanese continuing to crunch their way forward. No real hope. Again, the mud the lack of mud last year probably helped tremendously. I don't know if I screwed up every year so far, in which case, wow, that would really explain it, right? But the Japanese have been focused on armies, and definitely that has a strong impact on what they've been able to accomplish. They're pretty much defenseless against the U.S. when it comes in, as far as I can tell. Their hope is to get far enough in down here that they don't have to really worry about that. Well, we're up to another card play, and we'll start the spring. So this was actually a significant turn. You just flipped to the rising sun. And that's important, both for the effect of card play, but also in one particular card, which is the ability to create a settlement with Kiangsu. I have to look into that, make sure that my understanding is correct, that we would lose Sichuan and Hopei by doing so. Of course, yeah, Sichuan has just fallen, actually. So let me put them in the pile of failed Chinese states over here. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting situation, because if it is as I understand it, the Japanese kind of want to create minor countries out of those before they take their settlement. And that's actually what I've played for, so it's no big deal there. January, February 1940, Japan opens up with the puppet government they want to put into play. Unfortunately, they don't get the event off of that. They get another roll, but their other actions are in play. They're getting some reinforcements, etc. We can take a peek over at what happened. They've furthered their advance and have most of Yunnan now. It's down to the 1 hex, and of course they still have the Kiangsu stuck where they are. Over on the German side, they played the additional mobilization. Now that actually changes the game into limited war, and everybody's going to get a new deck. I've already given it to the Germans, but the Russians and Western allies are also going to get a new deck of cards, adding to their total choices for their next turn. It doesn't start a war, though. Nothing happened yet, but Germany is in a position where they're getting a lot more forces on the board very shortly, and I have to roll their conditional events as well, or some of them get rolled, some of them are automatic. I haven't placed all the replacements there, but that's about the effect of that. Onward, I guess. The Allies are largely just preparing this turn over in the Asian theater, Hong Kong fortifications. Got a political event there. Ended up placing a failure for command for the Japanese in China, and basically they're not going to be able to move their forces. It also costs them a support unit. Then over on the European theater, we had the Little Entente card. That ended up not doing anything. It would have come to an effect had Czechoslovakia been open. This was kind of a silly play. Austria, Czechoslovakia, Poland, and Hungary. Two of the countries, a 1/3 chance they can get an effect off of, but two of them they can't. And that kind of makes it less of a pleasing decision to have played that card. I kind of feel like couldn't you have done something else? Well, we were running at the bottom of the pre-war deck, and there wasn't a lot left. All right, on to the Ruskies. Let's take a look at the Russian plays. Again, back to the old recycling. And over here, another recycling the pre-war production. Gets them a few extra steps in play. Nothing much happening there. Did I do the... Yeah, I did the Allies with their fortifications, etc. So that's about it there. It's going to move forward as soon as I take care of some of the events there, and then we'll finish up the spring. So Spring of 40 war is still not broken out. Really, nothing's changed. You know, we already saw the Axis and what they managed there. I think the command failure didn't do much. It just prevented them from moving pieces around much. And actually, yeah, within a zone of control, so they could actually move these forward as well. Everywhere else, well, I got these Russians. I got to remember to upgrade them every so often. Those out of play now, but everything else, there's not a lot going on really. You know, we've got a definite Sitzkrieg here. Nobody's actually started the war though, so just not engaging as it is right now. I don't know if that's good or bad. Some things seem to indicate that stretching it out as the Axis is a good idea, especially in Europe. I don't know how much so, but it feels like it here in China that I want to delay things happening so that you know, I can extricate myself from the Chinese problem before anything happens, really. At least that's my hope here. All right. Well, I'll finish this up, and I guess we'll go through the summer too. Okay, let's give some background here. We're here in the beginning of the summer. I think things are going to slow down quite a bit here. Axis, Japan picks the Russian Neutrality Pact. That throws Japan into, well, that throws Russia into pact status, or neutrality pact, which means that they'll be less capable of intervening in Japan's affairs as they continue in China. Hard call. Do you want to knock the Brits out instead or something, which would have been a definite option? But then you possibly face Russia, and Russia looks kind of scary and like they might not be getting into the war in Europe very early. So Japan wants to keep them out of this. It's very obvious Britain's going to be up to their collective arses in war with what's going on here. In fact, France may not fall quickly, which may make things kind of weird for Britain. It'll also make things kind of ugly for the Japanese because, well, they kind of count on getting that cheap Indochina space. They were hoping to bump their points up based on that. Of course, at +3, they're not. The next set is +6. That's hard to get to. Right now, they're actually at +4 because they finally took out Yunnan. We got the counters here. And I tell you what, let's take a peek at what the German action was. Got it over here. It's case yellow. Bang, I'm going into France. I want to go with a little bit more detail for this. I'm going to get a blitz marker because of the little lightning bolt up here that says, and that's kind of the first time I'm getting one of those, I think, at all. And I've got a pile of air forces and a really, really intense goal. I have to take either Paris or 3 cities. Now, Metz right now is fortified. And we'll talk about this all a little later. I want to load this one up and then come back in detail with what's going on here.